Hi, everyone. Welcome. We are super excited to be here to talk about money and brands. My name is Ashley Blackwood. I am the founder and chief strategist of a firm called The Sports Publicist, where we create strategies, communication strategies, and branding strategies for athletes, athletic brands, and executives in the sports space. A little bit about me. So prior to starting my own company, I actually was in crisis management or crisis communications with the real life Olivia Pope for a couple years. I started the New York office in the sports division, where we not only focus on crisis, but we also focused on how to grow our clients' brand beyond their traumatic situations. Prior to that, I worked for the New York Knicks, the Phoenix Suns, and several NBA teams, and I was in the technology space for a bit with SAP as the head of their Marcoms for their global partnerships.
Good morning. My name is Jaya Thomas. I am a sports and entertainment attorney. A little bit about myself. I've been practicing law for about 12 years now. Originally from Cincinnati, Ohio. Went to undergrad in upstate New York, Colgate University, and law school in Washington, D.C. at George Washington University. I work with athletes and entertainers, helping them with their intellectual property, predominantly copyrights, trademarks, soft IP. All my work is also transactional. I help athletes and entertainers with contract drafting, negotiating deals, and I've also done a lot of work in the social media space. I'm also a professor at UCLA. I teach a course on copyright law and the entertainment industry. And Jay Tucker and I actually did a program last week at UCLA for NBA and WNBA players on the business of entertainment, teaching players about the business side of entertainment and how to get in this space.
Awesome. Hi guys, Ricardo. I am the creative director of a platform called Uninterrupted, which is LeBron James and Mavericks sports empowerment company. What we wanted to do by creating Uninterrupted is have a place for athletes to tell their stories on their terms. So a lot of, this was maybe, I guess now about 5 years ago when LeBron was returning back to the Cavs, he really wanted to deliver that message more directly. And as you can imagine, a lot of athletes, when they give announcements or interviews, a lot of that stuff can be taken out of context or you don't get the full picture. So he really wanted to create a place that all athletes could go to share their story in the way they want to present it. So that's what we do there. We actually have a sizzle reel that we would love to share with you. A little bit more information about the kind of work we do. We have shows on HBO, The Shop, along with various other shows on Hulu and our own platforms and our own branded content. So if we could just play that little sizzle.
I have a message from the Most High.
I got my own relationship with God, Lord.
People told me what I couldn't do, or people told me what I wasn't going to be. I was able to overcome that.
It was hard for me because I struggled to balance the work and mom. I'm trying to work and make a better life for her as well.
If you don't dream it, you can't become it.
You can't become it.
So you gotta put yourself there. You gotta think that it's achievable.
I crossed over LeBron James. That's factual.
This fucking guy!
When I decided I was gonna start speaking up, my whole mindset was it's not about me.
And I'm gonna tell you something, there are fucking rules in this shit.
I'm starting to realize my voice is a little bit stronger than it was before.
I am more than an athlete. I'm still a human being that has a platform and a voice.
That was actually pretty good. I need one of those for myself. So thank you for sharing that. Did you want to talk to the piece a little bit?
Sure, yeah.
And what the thought behind more than the athlete in the campaign?
Yep, sure. So, we created this thing called More Than an Athlete. We really kind of looked at and heard from many, many athletes and that desire. You've heard that colloquial term, I'm sure you've heard in interviews and such, where an athlete's like, yeah, but I'm much more. And I think part of our mission is to help them achieve that at the highest level, right? Like, I want to be a businessman, I want to be an actor, I really want to be dimensional. And in sports, a lot of times that's been seen as bad or as a distraction. Whereas in normal life, if any of us took on another task, it would be like, oh, that's great, you know, like you're learning piano, that's going to be awesome. But for some reason in sports, it's kind of been the opposite. So a lot of what we're trying to do is destigmatize that and really celebrate all athletes. And as a halo effect, you know, we really want to help young athletes in particular to become more than athletes. Because as we well know, it's such a difficult road and such a small percentage of people actually turn that corner. But we want people to still have the benefit of playing sports, being on a team, working hard, all the kind of residual effects that come with being on a sports team. We still want to encourage that, but we also know that if we help people at a young age to become more than an athlete, I'm going to build this other set of skills that are going to provide for me, you know, a long tail of my career if in the event that, and the most likely event that I won't become a professional athlete. But we never wanted to wag our fingers at young people and say like, oh, it's not going to happen, you should really try something else, what's the backup plan? Or we want to lead with like, to be a great athlete, you have to be more than an athlete. And one example that was really, really interesting to us when LeBron was coming to LA. We wanted to do an LA Lakers billboard that would welcome him here and wanted to put him with the other greats of LA as more than an athlete. And it was so fascinating that every person you put on there, you could put on for something else. So Kareem, you could put as an author. Shaq could be Shaq Diesel, the DJ. He could be a sheriff. He could be Kazam, an actor, a rapper. You had Magic, businessman. You had Kobe, could be holding up an Oscar. So it was like, wait a second, there's something really, really interesting about being a great athlete and being more than an athlete that are actually symbiotic with each other. So that's the mission we're trying to spread right now.
Absolutely, and that brings us to the point that athletes are becoming more and more their own brands. Yes, they're connected to teams, organizations, leagues, but they are now touching their consumer base or their fan base from their social media channels. Jaya, can you talk about how do athletes now kind of own their own IP? What's the process for that? How are they creating content on their own? And why is it important for them to kind of go down this path now?
Great question. So social media is great now for athletes because it kind of gets rid of the middleman. You know, with traditional forms of media like television or radio, you kind of had to go through a third party to get your message out. But now with social media, athletes can go straight to Twitter, they can go straight to Instagram, and it really kind of gives them the freedom and the flexibility to create the type of content and to share the type of message that they want to send to their audience. In terms of protecting the IP that they do share on social media, so there are a couple different types of IP that we're talking about. We're talking about trademarks and we're talking about copyrights. So a phrase like more than an athlete, that would qualify as a trademark. You know, it's a logo, it's a brand identifier, and more than an athlete is actually a mark that LeBron registered with the trademark office about a year ago. So athletes who are coming up with their own logos or their own brand identifiers, they can go about registering those themselves with the trademark office. Now, with regards to content itself, we're talking about videos, we're talking about maybe short films. That type of IP would fall under copyright. And a lot of athletes can go about registering, you know, their short films, their videos with the Copyright Office. And it's a fairly easy process to do that.
So we started a conversation in the back about like creating content, right? Both Uninterrupted and individual athletes, as well as so many other brands, are starting to say it's very important for us to create our own content so that we can own it. But then they're placing it on on your Instagrams, your Facebooks, your Twitters, your distribution channels, or they're shopping it to different media outlets and publications like Uninterrupted as a part of telling their story. How does that process work? Because I was under the impression that if you're leveraging these third party, they kind of own some of the share in that content space, even though they may not be the creators or the producers of that.
You want to talk from the lead, from me, from
Legally.
So, I mean, let's say I'm Jordan Peele and I create a movie. Just because I put that movie on Instagram doesn't mean Instagram owns it.
Okay.
Yeah, so you still own the rights to your content. And the platform that you're putting it on you are giving them certain rights to repurpose it, but at the end of the day, you do still own it.
And from our entry point, it's been very interesting to see, depending on the generation of athlete, where they come in. The young individuals, young men and women, a lot of them do come in with, I've had a shooter with me the whole time, and I went on a road trip across the country and we visited all the most important sports places on earth. We have it here. Is this something of interest to you guys? So our entry point with them would be, we can work with them in a licensee capacity. We can actually go out and sell that content, look for sellers. We can put that against brands, so talking with brands that specific content can align with that brand initiatives. And then, there's individuals that come in with just ideas. So in those cases, we might co-produce in that they don't have any film, but they have a really, really great idea that they have a big vision on. And there's been coming more and more athletes that actually do come in with like even director treatments or people around them that deliver director treatments. And then it goes the other way too, where we'll have an idea and we'll go to them, and depending if it's a brand or something that that we can co-own and go out to market. So it's just a variety of ways that we will intersect with content that's made to ideation.
I'm going to just piggyback off that too. Also, if athletes are working with brands, so let's say Foot Locker comes to an athlete and says, listen, I want you to create 4 Instagram posts about our new t-shirts coming out, in the summer. Then something like that, the brand may end up owning that content. But I've seen some deals and worked on some deals where the athletes will require that they own the content. So it really just depends on the structure of the deal.
Right. No, that definitely makes sense. So all of this is a part of storytelling. Athletes want to tell their own stories. Different sports brands want to tell their own stories. Media outlets want to tell their stories. And where I sit, earned media is still extremely valuable. That's the New York Times, the kind of holistic journalism that doesn't have a monetization model or that doesn't necessarily come with some type of payment. However, I'm finding more and more that it's not interesting to the talent side of it. People want to now be compensated for giving their stories or sharing their stories and going back to what we were originally discussing, owning their content. Can you talk to a little bit how you kind of engage with talent in that storytelling process, and then share it specifically on your platform and kind of the storytelling art of it?
And then how it relates to PR.
And how it relates to PR and
Yep.
how we align with one another.
Yep. So, kind of the first part of that question is like we really try to engage athletes and really talk to them from an empathetic point of view. What's very different about our company is that because there's no middle people we represent, we in some ways represent what the athlete story want to tell. So, we start there and really quiz them on what do they want to be, what do they want to become, what story do they want. And I'll translate that information into something that I was on the receiving end for when I worked in advertising, which is a brief. If you've ever worked with advertising companies or marketers, they hand over the creatives a brief of this is what we want to say, do, strategic underpinnings, background, and this is the one important thing I want to say. I basically do that same process, reverse engineer that with the athlete being the client, and I end up developing myself a brief that says, what is the most important thing to say? And then as it relates to your world, why should people care? Because it's one thing for me to want to express a story, but why should anyone care? Why should culture care? What is contextual about your idea that's important to say in this given moment? Because you can tell a story anytime, but why is that important to say at this given moment? So we spend a lot of time talking with people like yourself in PR about what is it that you're seeing in the marketplace that people want to talk about, right. And how do we deliver that information back and correlate that with what the athlete wants to say. What does Netflix want to buy? What type of storytelling? So we're always triangulating all these different needs from people with keeping the athlete story at the center, and then we will change and shape that story to match the demand of what it is. Because, the worst thing happens, and it happens all the time, is that you have a story you post, but no one cares, and you spent all that energy and time for no one to want it. And so we really got to think about what those hooks are. What is the universal truth in that story that goes beyond sports in our case? For More Than an Athlete, we did an ESPN doc about LeBron and his friends and how they, came up together. Right. That's a story about brothers and brotherhood and going from, poverty to making it. And what does that mean? And what does that mean to stick together with people, even when people may not want you to be together? Right. So we really try to focus on what is the larger story that has zero to do with sports that will touch people and is an awesome story outside of the given medium. And that gives us a better chance to succeed in the earned space.
Because ultimately you want to share, right? You want to share that content. You want people to sit with it, enjoy it, experience it, and take your core messaging away from it. So I know, Jaya, you work with entertainers, you work with writers, producers, people in the entertainment industry who are truly outside of sports, right? And you have these emerging influencers coming up, right? And now you don't necessarily have to go to your traditional entertainer or your traditional sports talent to get your company messaging out anymore. Kind of walk me through the process of engagement with influencers and how that could be uniquely different from that of an athlete or an entertainer that you traditionally work with.
Yeah, so the influencer space is huge right now, and a lot of sports companies and brands are going straight to influencers to get their message across and to share information about their brand. So in the past, a lot of these companies would rely on traditional forms of media like television commercials and radio ads, but because so many people now are spending time on their phone or on the computer, for a lot of companies, it makes more sense for them to put their marketing dollars behind influencers to get more eyeballs, on the content that they're looking to share. So in terms of how a lot of brands are engaging with influencers, they're really looking for influencers that reach the audience they're trying to, target. So it's one thing to just go to an influencer who may have 2 million, 5 million followers, but if their followers don't fall within the type of audience that you're trying to reach, then you're not really going to see a really great ROI. So a lot of brands aren't just looking for people who have a ton of followers. They also want to see what your audience looks like. And those metrics are available, easily accessible on any social media platform. You can see how many women are following you, how many men are following you, what cities your followers are from. And so a lot of brands want to see that information in terms of what type of followers you have before they engage you. And then once they end up selecting whatever influencer they want to work with, it's just a matter of drafting that contract, negotiating that deal, and getting the content out there.
So let's say that I have 10,000 followers. I don't, but you can follow me. Just kidding. Say I had 10,000 followers and there was a niche brand coming up that really identified with my market. How do I engage with them to get my audience to follow or support their brand? Or is it something that 10,000 is not enough anymore? Is it 20,000? Is it 500,000? Like, what qualifies me to be an influencer, A, and then B, how do I start that engagement process to monetize my network?
This is a good question. And people are always wondering that. They're always like, well, do I need, 2 million followers to be an influencer? And the answer is no. There's no minimum. Well, I mean, you can't have like 10 or 20. But, outside of that, there's no real, minimum, no real maximum when it comes to the influencer space. And honestly, now more than anything, a lot of brands really look at engagement just as much as the number of followers, because honestly, followers can be bought. So even if someone has 2 million followers, 99% of those followers could be bought. And they want to really see that people are engaging with your content. So most brands want people who have an engagement that falls somewhere between 3 to 5%. Meaning 3 to 5% of your follower count, they're commenting on your post, they're liking your post, they're engaging with your post. So really the engagement rate is just as important as the follower count. That being said, if a brand, let's say Nike came to you, Foot Locker came to you, and they said, we would like you to post some content about, the new shoes we have coming out this summer, your next step would be to start negotiating with them on some of the key terms of what that deal would look like. Number one, payment, obviously. And number two, another really big one is creative control. You know your audience better than anyone else. So while the brand may have certain things they want you to include in that post, such as like certain hashtags, certain handles, things like that. Outside of that, you just want to make sure you have as much creative control to create the type of content that your audience
that
is
resonates.
Going to write.
Yeah. And then from a brand perspective, right? You hear the term, individuals are brands, and they can now commoditize their likeness as a brand with a lot of equity, specifically from individuals. How do you differentiate individual brands, your brand? Are they the same? Are they different? And what's your opinion of that?
Yeah, so at least for our own platform, because we're putting the athlete first, we really are generating content against what they want to say. I think the elements that we add to that is that we want it to be raw, more intimate, more honest. We try to cultivate that type of relationship with the athletes in spaces that they will share things that you wouldn't traditionally hear in that space or in sports space. So the shop being a good example of you really get to be a fly on the wall, but it's an environment where people get to learn from each other, express things honest, a little bit more honest than you're used to seeing. And I think part of that is building those brands and our brand against the expectation that they are human. And I think when we talked earlier in the green room just about brands, what's been interesting for us to see is not only athletes, but everyone saying they're a brand. And you've heard that term if you have children, or like I have a child, 3 kids, but one of them, talks about brand now. And it's like, what in the world?
They're their individual brand.
Yeah.
That I'm a brand.
And I think what I came through a world of advertising, and I think what we found a little bit dangerous about that is that, one, brands were from, literally branding property, which was people at once upon a time, and it was cattle. And Coca-Cola obviously was one of the first ones to apply that thought making to product itself. And we found it to be, over time, a good thing to get attention, a good thing to share your values, but almost a dangerous thing to a person when you become very reductionist as a human, that you don't have room to grow. So if you think about all these young people getting millions of dollars, expected to know everything at 20 years old, and Lord knows what I would do with 200 million at 19. It probably wouldn't be a good look, but we really are trying to give that wiggle room. Everyone's become, so defined by their values that they don't have room to grow, and you want that growth to happen from the time they get in the league to the time they retire to the time they come to 85 years old. And KD was one of the people early on in a meeting had mentioned, like, I'm really, really thinking about what am I going to do from 35 to 85? Like, this is so temporary. Being an athlete is so temporary. I maybe can get 10, 13 years, maybe. So why am I going to put everything into this one thing when I have so much more to discover, and I don't want to miss out on that? There's a clip that NBA Entertainment had captured of Michael Jordan during the 98 finals, and it was the epic, the peak of his popularity. And he's sitting on the couch smoking a cigar in his hotel room, and he says, "You don't want this life. I'm surrounded by these four walls. This is my life. No one would want this." And it's so interesting in contrast to be like Mike, the friendly Mike, that we grew up with and all the commercials. And I found that to be so interesting that logo was a photo, the silhouette of Jordan jumping was a photo of him doing the move, right? But to become an icon is to become that reductionist. And you remove the ability to make mistakes, to try things, to be things, outside of what that brand value is. So I think it's going to be a very interesting moment for athletes, a very interesting moment that is the demand from the audience to be authentic, so much so that you could be just a person that exists versus a silhouette. That's what we're really interested in discovering. And what we're kind of always aiming to do is how do we make this okay for you to be, a great sports person, have a great platform, but also give yourself permission to try things.
You said authenticity, which is what brands, what individuals, and what quote-unquote influencers are trying to be, right? And authenticity at its core is just you being yourself. Talking about, in the storytelling process, talking about the things that are important to you, that you care about, that you identify with, your experiences, et cetera, et cetera. It's a personal thing that you outwardly express. How do brands create that, right? As a human, as a person, I am equal parts my experiences, my heritage, my culture, my family, things that I've learned, all of those things. But as a brand, you're creating that. So how does that process happen? And then ultimately as a brand, you want to make money, right? So does that authenticity or that storytelling process kind of have to be modified to connect with people or consumers?
Not as much anymore, and I think that's what's so wonderful about this moment in media is that you can find an audience, and if there's just so many different ways to do that, and it's so global, and the internet opened up that door. And then I think in terms of authenticity, I think it's going to be a demand, particularly from younger people, that the companies that they get involved with have that level of transparency and authenticity, and you can't fight it. And there's nothing worse than seeing a brand take place or try to participate in something they have no business in, and people smell it out and they reject it. So it actually is going to be a business need, not just because it's the right thing to do. It's going to end up being a business need that you have to be authentic. And I think that really starts with who started the company in some cases, or what is the origin story of that company. So I worked for Lyft. I ran the creative group there, and that company. If you use Lyft, I don't know if you guys have used Lyft, or it's kind of known as the friendlier company, and people don't know why, and they can't necessarily always point to why. But there's a through line from the founder. He's a really nice person. He's a good guy. Like naturally, wants to do well for people. He cares about his impact, and he tries to make decisions against that. But you can't divorce his intent from what the brand feels like. And I found that to be so true across working with many brands is if that intent from whoever's leading it is not there, you will feel it in the work because it sprinkles down to the people you employ, down to how they brief the teams that create the work. If you believe in a bigger mission and you have a mission, everyone's going to be excited, and that brand is going to succeed because of it, and that brand will be true because everyone is on the same page about what that North Star is. So I think that every company really has to figure out what that is. Sometimes it's a commodity business, and that's also okay. That's totally okay, but it's cool. It's fine to be a commodity business too, and just be the best at delivering that service or product in the best way possible. I think where it gets really strange is when those brands start to step into lifestyle spaces or cultural spaces or making commentary where they don't belong. And that's when you really feel the inauthentic, and you get a lot of backlash usually, especially if you miss with whatever marketing you're doing.
And then Jaya, from a legal perspective, you have individuals, again, saying that they are brands, they're creating content, they're doing all of these things. Is there advice you would give them in creating these startup brands that they should just have in place, so when the following comes or the content is created and you start getting tractions and you want to monetize those things, what are the core basics of creating a brand from the beginning that you would recommend to the athletes transitioning into their brands or young influencers transitioning into their own brands?
I think the key pieces of legal advice I would give, definitely make sure you have a good lawyer that really
She's available, hashtag, no, just kidding.
That really understands this space. And, I also think it's important for athletes to understand this space, for themselves as well. But definitely make sure you have a good legal team. And also, just protect as much as your content as possible.
Yeah. And then my last question to you two. I feel like everyone in the room has an iPhone or a smartphone or a camera and can create content, right? You can then leverage that content on your personal channels, or you can connect with other people to leverage that content. When is enough, right? Like, when are we too in it or creating too much or overexposing ourselves and overexposing our IP or brand or whatever you have it? And then what does this look like in the future? Are we still going to continue on this escalator? And what does the drop off look like for you all?
Oh man.
That's a hard question.
Yeah, it's very hard to know, if you're at like peak. I think the term is like peak content, like there's just too much of it. I definitely have found myself just as a consumer, like overwhelmed by how many messages and things exist. Most of, I guess really talking to that audience very specifically, authentically, giving them things that are of actual value. I think right now we're in that content space where people have been focusing so much on gaming the system, like 10 top things to make you feel better, or whatever that language is of clickbait, that I think people are missing the point of actually giving something that matters. So this weekend is a wonderful example of, you have Endgame with the Avengers and you have Game of Thrones. Two things that are super long, that 3-hour movie that millennials don't have the attention span, or Gen Z, but we'll go watch a 3-hour movie. And the thing that always became curious to me is that it's just got to be great, and it's got to be good, and it's got to be additive. And those are the questions that I think, as long as we can answer as marketers or content creators, we will always have a place. How that shows up, I have no idea. Usually it's a new piece of technology we can't anticipate. Our world is upended by YouTube, by having a phone in your pocket. Is that going to be AR glasses that come next? So I think storytelling has always existed, will continue to exist. What form it takes will just be some really, really smart person that invents some technology that we will try to hijack to tell stories in, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that was a great answer. And I think sometimes you can just, when too much is too much, I don't really have any specific, guidelines or barometers as to when too much is too much. But I think most times you can tell when you're doing a lot.
Doing the most.
But, where this space will go, I think it's just going to continue to grow. And as, new technology continues to emerge, I think this space is going to get even bigger.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.